Welcome to Act 3 Live or Act 3 Life. It's a great thing that you're with us, and a special welcome to anyone who hasn't been here before. We've got people joining us tonight from across the world.
New Zealand?
Yes, yeah, as far away from here as you can possibly get.
A couple of them in there.
Yeah, definitely.
Australia, I think.
And
other places too.
If you,
even down the road.
True. And if you're a friend, we're talking about friends tonight, so welcome to friends. Some of you we've known for decades now.
Far too long to imagine, even to count. We'll probably get into a bit of that later. But yes, some of our friends go back almost most of my life.
Yeah, very long time. So if you hear any funny noises, it might be the dog.
We've got a dog called Teddy, who's a good friend of ours. He's down there and he's standing by the door hoping to get out, but he's not going to get out for the next hour. He's just been out.
He's got bladder issues. Oh, too much information.
Anyway, he doesn't have bladder issues. He's a puppy. He hasn't got to our age yet.
Yeah, who's got the bladder issues? Anyway, so if you haven't seen us before, my name is Judy Reith, and as a job I work in coaching, and that basically means I help people sort their problems out, but not in a therapy way. It's much more about helping people to sort out goals that they want to work on, and then how they're going to get there in all kinds of life areas, whether it's to do with career or friends, partners, or children, parenting issues, moving house, all kinds of
jobs,
things.
yeah.
I've been a coach for 20 years, and you are?
Well, my name's Adrian. I've been married to you, I think, for 30 years.
Yes.
And I'm also a coach inspired by you. I was previously an advertising man, and when I was 50-something, I retrained as a coach because I was impressed by the coaching work you'd done with kids in your parenting work, and I just thought, yeah, it's working for me, and so I retrained. So that was what I've been doing for the last 15 years or so.
That kind of thing.
And yeah, I work with people in businesses and running things.
So together we've spent 4 years researching and writing a book about what it might mean to grow older in a way that you can die without regrets, is the basic headline of the book. And it's about Act 3. And what we mean by Act 3 is the years roughly between 50-ish and 70, maybe 80, when you've still got plenty of opportunity to go out and do stuff and reinvent your lives. So big welcome. And tonight we're talking specifically about the subject of friends.
Last week we covered home. As we are going through themes in the book, we're covering different aspects of the book. And last week we talked about the importance of home in this stage of our lives, and because it becomes quite an pressing issue, you know, as people's lives change, maybe careers have moved on, families have perhaps moved away. So the issue of redefining what the right home for is in Act 3 is important. And we've had some great people saying some feedback about them chatting about what they were thinking about last week with regard to their home. A couple of people talking about downsizing, maybe moving home, maybe building a house or something, making a change. We'd be happy to talk to people who want any help with that kind of thing. So please get in touch if you want to talk about that. We heard from Nicola, who is also thinking about doing an adult gap year, inspired by our guests of last week, who were Phil and Steph Johnston in New Zealand, who have done some very interesting things with their lives in this stage of their lives. And Pen wrote to us saying how surprised she was that she quickly found a new home for herself in Act 3, and how also surprised she was in how many new friends she made in her new town of Winchester, where she moved to. So, and that was, I think, centered around some raised beds that she
in the street.
She adopted in the street that belonged to the council, but someone they'd been neglected, so she decided to take them on, and other people rallied around. And that kind of sort of reminds us of this week, the conversation in our streets, WhatsApp, which is a kind of a new thing since COVID has been going on. Compost has been a bit of a theme for us in the street. And, you know, it's interesting how different people rally around different subjects, also other things, of course, not just compost. So if you want to catch up with all the other weeks, this is week 10 of all the Zoom weeks that we've been doing around our book. And you can catch up with those on YouTube, and you can access those via our website, which is act3life.com. So do catch up if you want to go and do some revision.
So you will know this if you've been reading the book and if you've been watching these Zooms, but very quickly, just to recap, the heartland of the book is a model that we created about your life as a tree. So if we can just have a look at the tree slide there, there it is. And the roots there are the most significant bit. So all parts of our lives, but particularly in Act 3, when our attitude is positive and constructive, when we understand what is the meaning of our lives, what's the purpose, why do we get up every day, and then how do we go about that? Do we do that through feeling that justice matters, or kindness, or being as constructive as you can? What are your values? And then lastly, in the roots there is your key relationships. So if any of those 4 things are in trouble, the rest of your tree, which is your physical health and all of those topics in the branches that we've been going through, are going to be challenged and in trouble. So that's why we still every week say how important the roots are. We have been covering all of these areas. As Adrian said, you can watch those Zooms if you're interested, and it's in the book. So what are we actually going to cover tonight? Why should we talk about friends? Well, by the time we get to Act 3, the whole topic of friends can sometimes be quite emotive for us. Perhaps we know friends right now that obviously we're really missing, but also perhaps they're problematic for us, they're challenging, perhaps they're people we've done many, many years with by this point, or perhaps they're new. Perhaps you've recently made new friends through hobbies and interests, or through COVID-19, through helping out neighbours and that kind of thing. I've got a school friend, and I worked out I've known her for over 50 years. We met when we were at infant school together. I can't replace those life miles. You know, there's so much history there. And although we don't see each other very often, when we do catch up, we just carry on where we left off. And there's great comfort in that, for sure. But, you know, with this time of COVID, it's been so hard and painful. You know, we chatted to someone earlier this week who said they've not had a hug from anybody since March the 26th, you know, 11 weeks ago now.
It's a long time to go without a hug.
And for many people who are living alone, irrespective of COVID, perhaps there is a lack of hugs, a lack of physical contact as well.
That could be normal for some people.
Yeah. Being listened to, and the other things we think of with friendship.
So tonight we are very lucky to have a couple of friends of ours being our special guests tonight. It's Martin and Julia Evans. Both of them are in Act 3. They've got many years of examples of being involved with friendships and creating neighbours and neighbourhoods and friendships, and helping people find sort of purpose and meaning in their own lives. So we'll have time to have a chat with them, and there'll be a time after that to discuss in small groups amongst ourselves. We'll split up into groups, our own experience of friendships. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to. You're welcome to say nothing, or you can even be anonymous. But I'm hoping that you'll be able to get something out of that conversation, which I think a lot of people do value. Just before we move on, I'll just tell you a bit about housekeeping. We're going to control who speaks tonight, just so that it makes it more intelligible for everybody. And please type in your questions and comments as we go. And I want you to please set your screen on speaker view. I think you'll get a better experience. Top right of your screen, put yourself on speaker view. And if you can, use the chat function. Why don't you go to the chat function now and type in how old you are. We're all in this together. I'm 65. I was 65 2 weeks ago.
59 and a half. Tell us how old you are.
Tell us how old you are, because it's just be useful to know.
Here we go, 62. We won't tell you we are 42. Okay, fine. Welcome.
It's all a big secret.
Everybody's welcome.
Everybody's got some age or other.
Oh, here we go. We could do an average at the end, actually.
We could.
Here we go, 68.
But you've got a Maths O level you recently acquired, haven't you?
That was the maddest thing I've done, yeah. I did Maths O level GCSE 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
But that's another story.
Why would you do that, Judy?
Because it's Act 3. Have a challenge.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
It certainly was. I've never heard so much swearing coming out of your office.
Yeah, that's true.
A whole year of swearing.
That's
My
terrible.
goodness.
Anyway, don't ask me any maths questions, because it's all, of course, just gone in and straight out. Okay, so also what we like to do is just take a moment to remember the significance of the fact that many people are struggling and suffering and sad and uncertain and worried, and it's something, as we've said before, we do this every day in our house, to just make a moment to remember those who are not as fortunate as perhaps we are, and maybe you. This has been a week of anger. It's been a week of protests. We've been very mindful of the Black Lives Matter issues, not just in America, but obviously in the UK, and how to respond in a way that feels true of who we are has been something we've been talking about all week. So we light our candle for people that are on our minds.
Do you know the guy, Edward Colston, whose statue was taken down in Bristol? He went to my school 300 years ago, which is a bit of a sobering thought.
That's a very weedy candle. Oh
well. Sometimes candles are weedy. While you're having another go at lighting it, I'll just remind everybody, have another go, Jude, that it's important to take care of yourself. We say this every week. We say it every session we do, every workshop, but it's important to take care of your own feelings. Everybody starts from a different place in life and has different experiences, and rather than focusing on the things which aren't going right, that you haven't got, maybe concentrate tonight on what inspires you and energizes you and enables you to move forward. And because the reason why we chose the name Act 3 is it's about taking action and moving forward into the future in a way that might be more positive than it was last week or yesterday or last year. So that's the whole purpose of it. And if we could have the next slide, Tilly, one of the things, the quotes we quite, that famous quote, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, in our book, we decided to say it takes a village to age well. That's our kind of attitude, is we're grateful for the friends we have, aren't we? And we kind of feel like, wouldn't it be great if everybody had a great bunch of friends? And I think a lot of people do, but some don't.
But I think we need to say as well, what do we mean by friends? What are we thinking of when the word friends, or neighbours actually, because we're going to think about neighbours as well tonight. What does that actually bring to mind? And is it someone you can lean on, someone you can be your true self with, someone you can be vulnerable with? It might be someone you share interests with, such as a sporting thing or a hobby of some kind. It might be, it might be a whole range of things. If I could peep into your minds, I'd love to hear what you think of when you hear the word friend, and perhaps you can stick that in the chat as well. But
yeah, why not?
There's a wonderful poet we love called Padre Gautama, and he says about friends, he says, "You are the place where I stand when my feet are sore," which I just loved. You are the place where I stand when my feet are sore. And it's that sense of sometimes we need to hold each other. And that's what friendship can do for us, is when the chips are down, perhaps when your feet are sore, someone is there for you. And maybe it's a very, very close relationship. Maybe it's perhaps someone who was in the key relationships bit of your tree. But tonight we're kind of thinking more wide and general about the value of friends as we age and move through Act 3. And within that, I think it is really important to think about our neighbours and perhaps other community groups that perhaps you have connections with as well.
I think in Act 3, it's more likely we're going to need our friends. It isn't, I don't think, wise to wait for a crisis before you work out who your friends are. It's probably a better idea to use the time we've got now to figure out who we want to be friends with. Just thinking about what the science tells us about this, and maybe this lands as news to you, but one of the studies we looked at for the book says those with strong social relationships had a 50% lower chance of death across the average study period of 7.5 years than those with weak connections. So there is a strong connection between this subject and health and longevity. So it's pretty serious stuff, even though friendships can be light and lovely at the same time. Not always light and lovely, but we'll get into that a bit later.
So one of the silver linings of COVID, and I know it's been absolutely dreadful for many, many people, but you could say, some people can say, that it has done something for neighbours. And I read something in the paper this week about a really dreadful back alleyway somewhere, I think it was Liverpool, which was a no-go area. But what's happened at this time is that everybody's ganged up and cleared it all out and made it a really beautiful resource for everybody whose little houses back onto it. And so children can play there safely, and the neighbours are now dragging little chairs out and having a cup of tea or a glass of wine. And it's become a central place that didn't have a hope of being used in that way. And in our road, on our street WhatsApp, there's about 100 houses in our road, and the WhatsApp group has been an absolute lifeline through this time. And somebody this week had a baby, and pictures were shared of this newborn baby. And I honestly don't think that would have happened had it not been for this whole sort of injection of commitment to supporting one another and being a good neighbour at this time. It was just lovely to see this newborn baby, for sure. So we also know that neighbours and friends can be a flipping pain in the arse. Really difficult, challenging, people we want to walk away from, people we perhaps think, why on earth did I ever think they were my friend, or they're throwing legal things at us, all sorts. But something that I've found helpful over many years is to think of a jigsaw puzzle. And I hope you can see that. It's a piece there. And I carry one of these in my purse, which is very battered. And when it falls to bits, I put another one in, because it just helps me remember that you never know the full picture, and that somebody's nastiness towards you or surprising way of responding could well be that there's something else going on in their puzzle which has trodden on them, maybe that day or generally, and that their life is not what they need it to be or want it to be, and they're taking it out on you. So I try and hold on to that metaphor really of the piece of jigsaw, and to see if that helps me be a bit more open and understanding, I guess.
And people are different. You and I are different. You're an extrovert, I'm an introvert. And there are lots of examples in our book about different ways to make friends. Some people find it more easy than others. I think you find it more easy than I do, Judy. Things like volunteering, doing stuff together in the community, dog walks. I mean, since we've had dogs in our family, we've met so many people and so many lovely people, and a couple of people that aren't so lovely, but mostly people who are. And that's been very interesting. Mentoring, tutoring, teaching, doing hobbies, religion, dancing, education, university of the third age. There's all kinds of ways to make friends. And people like me who are introverts don't necessarily need as many friends as someone like Judy who's an extrovert. It doesn't matter. It's the quality of the friendship that you give and receive that really matters, I think, in the end. And actually, a good friend of ours reminded us many years ago, how many friends do you actually really need? You don't need that many good friends. You just need one or two good ones. And and that's probably enough. So we're not talking about a ridiculous ask here.
In the book, actually, there's a little exercise that we put in there to help you sort of map out your friends and who they are and where they are as well. It's quite an interesting thing to do. And
Winnie the Pooh teaches us something, of course, very important. He is one of the most profound teachers of our time. You can't stay in your corner of the forest waiting for others to come to you. You have to go to them sometimes. And I think that's, in fact, Penn, who I quoted in our newsletter today, who was the person who moved to Winchester and worked on her raised bed, she confirmed that in an email to me yesterday to say, it's about making the first move often, which, we're not always understandably wanting to do. Why don't they come to me? Well, you could debate that forever, but the reality is, if we make the first move, something is more likely to happen. And so that's worth something to think about.
And sometimes it just starts by saying hello, finding that courage to just say hello to the shopkeeper, to the neighbour that you've known for years, but you've never really known them or even said hello. So sometimes it's like that, or even just good morning. So Martin Rowe, the poet, wrote a poem called Morning, which I'll read to you now. Morning. It started when I recognised someone on the canal path. Morning, I said to the next person. I don't know why, as they jumped physically from the world inside their phone. Morning. I was feeling defiant, Why shouldn't we greet each other just because we don't know each other? Morning. I changed the ringtone slightly, going up on the second syllable, morning, and then again down on the first, morning, to see if I could safely draw someone's gaze from inside their mind. We know each other and we don't. Connected to those we think we're not. Maybe that's why I said morning to the next person on the towpath. A miniature insurrection in favour of connection. Morning. She looked surprised and oddly grateful. Morning. No need to explain, it's all in the eyes. She is looking at me. I'm looking at her. We get that we don't know each other, even though the next time we make eye contact, we'll know that we do, as we remember that we don't.
Maybe you could type into your chat thing how you make and keep friends in Act 3, just to take a second to do that. How do you make and keep friends in Act 3? And if you don't, say, I don't.
Yeah, if you find it. Yeah,
That's
yeah,
fair enough.
yeah. This is a friendly space. So.
And while you're doing that, I'm going to introduce Martin and Julia Evans. They're a couple we've known for a long time. Martin's 72, Julia's nearly 70, and they're officially retired, but they're far from a feet up couple. We've known each other for 50 years and 3 months, they said, and been married for 46 years and 9 months. And Judy and I were amazed to realize we've known them for most of that time. He's a former manager in the NHS and consultant and trainer. Martin spent many hours every week buried amongst friends and neighbors on shared projects, causing a stir and making a curry that never runs out. I have to say, I really like his curries. Julia is a retired primary school teacher. She's taught our kids.
Yeah.
And spent her Act 3 years running a successful toddler club, supporting vulnerable adults in the community and training as a lay minister in the Church of England. They've local, national and international friends from all walks of life. They talk about the important things in life, I think, with a light touch. So that's something that we admire. So Martin and Julia, are you going to unmute yourselves? Are you unmuted?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah, there you are, there you are. So
good, it works.
So what is friendship about for you, particularly in Act 3?
Well, first of all, can I just say I didn't realize I had so much to say about friendship, and I think that's probably the beauty of your book, that you read a bit and then it just sets you thinking. So quite a lot of thoughts about it. What's friendship? I think friendship develops or relies on your kind of personality, and I know we are very different personalities, and the way that we make and keep friends and the way that we approach friends is different. And I know too that friendship is at all kinds of levels, as you've already mentioned. And it's a great privilege to have those friendships. And as you say, you don't need many, but those friendships that are just a very special, close relationship, feeling that you are known, you know them, they know you, and it's not going to change. And you don't need many, but I just hope that everybody has at least one of those. They're very special. But of course, friendships come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. There's friendship. There's those that have been friends over many years. Friendships kind of forged when you've got young children or you're kind of at university. Those kinds of friendships. Some just dwindle. Some remain. And then, for me, there's friendships that have developed over the last 10 years. And that's interesting, really. Not many, but I mean, when I say friendships, I mean kind of deep friendships. There's lots of kind of friendships on the edge, friendships, go out into the street. We're very fortunate that we live in a great community. We live on a terraced road. There's a street close by where all our shopping needs and eating out needs are met. And I don't think I ever leave the house without speaking to someone. And more than hello, sharing people's lives, partly because I taught in this area, so I know quite a lot of people there. We're also very fortunate to be part of a church that is a great community and has a community centre, and many of our friendships have been forged there. And again, even in that large community, the friendships are at different levels. But what's great about that community is that there's just such a vast range of people. And then there's people like you, the friendship that has started really through Greenbelt. Many of you here might know about Greenbelt, but it's a kind of yearly festival that's been going over 40 years. And some very important friendships have developed there. Friendship, I think, can be troublesome sometimes, and I've experienced that. I'm not great at getting over troublesome things. Martin's brilliant at it. And it can be painful too, I think. Friendship can be painful. And I do think occasionally friendship can be competitive, and that's uncomfortable, I think, when you feel that. But again, I think that is according to personality. I think also friendship is good when it's intergenerational. And I think we've had the privilege in churches that for instance, I think our daughter's wedding, I think our daughter really wanted our friends to be there as much as her friends. And I think it was that kind of occasion, and it was great. And I think I better let Martin speak, otherwise I'll run out of time.
Thank you. Right, Martin.
I shall be a little briefer.
Thank you.
Firstly, I've got 3 points. When in crisis, I've had a couple of crises in my life, I know I've got people I can turn to, and it's unconditional, their acceptance of me and their support for me. And I know I've got that, so that's friendship at one level. At my 70th, I suddenly realised that all of my history pretty well was present in the room. And actually, it didn't feel about me. It felt that we were all celebrating our life together. We were celebrating our community, our sense of community, that we're not alone. We are with others, and they are our friends. And I had a tremendous sense of well-being in terms of there were 5 or 6 communities there from where we've lived and Greenbelt and other things like that. And actually, and all those friendships were not all at different levels, but there were some different levels there. And it was just a sense of it, that friendship is a celebration of not being alone. And the final thing, I think you said it really well earlier, Judy, is that this thing about neighbours. I got an example. I was in the house here and I needed to be in town in 5 minutes, and I hadn't got a car and I hadn't got a bike, and I certainly wasn't going to run it and get there in 5 minutes. And I thought, who the hell could I get to give me a lift? And I thought about 3 or 4 friends close by actually who but I knew oh, really, have I got to come now? And I suddenly thought about the shop at the top of the road, Alamin, which is a general greengrocers, butchers, etc. And the guy who runs it, Abdul. And I went straight to the shop to Abdul. I need to be in town in 4 minutes. He shouted loud in his accent, and a car was outside in 1 minute. And I got to town within 4 minutes. And I thought, how did I know that Abdul would respond? I just knew. Now, he's a friend at one level, but we've had many. 9/11 happened. The first thing I did when it happened, I went to see him and try to get an understanding of his very strong Muslim perspective and my perspective. And so you're having kind of really, really deep conversations. But I mean, I don't go around Abdul's house and chat to him. Another example of that, and then I'll stop. Trish, my sister-in-law, she had 2 friends. She's now 86. She was having her hair done and got chatting to her hairdresser, who she had become very friendly with. The hairdresser said, "Oh, why don't you come round for a drink with my mates?" There were 30 of them. She's now part of a community of 30 women who drink wine together and have a fabulous time. And she cannot believe her luck. Now, that was a hairdresser. Abdul's a shopkeeper. Graham, the final bit, Graham, who does my bike, I, in the last 15 years, have talked with him through his divorce, through the bring up of his children, and through his new relationship. And we are good friends. Now, we don't go for a drink together. We don't, any of those sorts of things. But I would definitely consider him now to be a friend. That there is friendship at all those kind of levels.
Martin, what is it about you that gets those things started? How does it start?
I'm quite loud. I don't lack confidence. I think it's this whole thing of the celebration of life. I do go out of the door here looking for possibilities. I do, honestly. I do. I can't help it. That's how it is.
Yeah.
And there is lots and lots of good chat to be had with people if you get the chat going. And I always have done. I mean, it's just my nature. As you have been interested, we're different as well, and I'm just like that, and enjoy it enormously.
Can I say though, Martin, that you don't mind an argument, and it seems to me that it doesn't end a friendship if you fall out or have a bit of a bust up. It's like you're sort of energized by an argument. What's that about?
Well, I'm probably not a very nice person, actually. When I was in management, in one of the jobs in my life, and I was having trouble managing people, I kind of learned this phrase about going into the eye of the storm. That actually, there's no point of pussyfooting around and not getting a clarity in terms of what we're trying to achieve together, whoever it is, and it carrying on being muddled. If you go into the eye of the storm, with your feelings, being honest about your feelings, it's often quite a calm place to be. And I've kind of learned that not to be afraid to go into the eye of the storm if necessary. And I think also, if you've got, Judy used a really good word earlier, collateral with people, then actually if it does kind of go wrong, I mean, I had a dreadful bust up with my neighbour recently. She, not a couple of years ago now, she got something wrong, behaved appallingly. I behaved much worse. She came round not long after and said, "Look, could we make this up? Because I want to." There was collateral there. There was collateral. We built it up. We've got 15 years worth of Christmas parties here, and it means that in the street people have got collateral. They've got some history together, and if you've got history, and you can generally get over most kind of mishaps.
Yeah.
So, but for Julia, what kind of a friend are you? Because you mentioned earlier that you find it hard to get over things. So can you tell us a bit more about that for you?
Well, I'm a sort of friendly person, so I easily relate to people, easily have I don't want to use the word superficial, but you know what I mean by that. So I can easily chat to lots and lots of different people at all kinds of different levels. I'm not so good, I don't think, at, I don't have the confidence Martin has in friendships. So I'm really glad that we are a team, because it really helps. And so that's a benefit really for me. But I think to friendship, you do need confidence sometimes. You need to step out. You need to have the, be prepared to be rejected. Or or rejected again is rather strong, but for it not to be what you were anticipating it to be, I think you have to be prepared for that. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. I'm not so brave as that. I do have some friends who I think are very brave in that sense that they reach out, and in a sense that's why I'm their friend, because they reached out to me. Seems a bit, the wrong way round, but that's how it goes for me sometimes. I don't think I share myself easily at a deep level with many people, but I do with some. And they're mostly people who've been friends over many, many years. And, just that sense that this is never really going to change. And it's about being prepared to be known, but really wanting to be known and wanting to know them. But it's a bit scary as well. The other thing that I'm aware of about my friendship, that I think I am really good at befriending people who perhaps are vulnerable and needy. And I don't know what that is about. I'm sure it's a lot to do with me. Maybe I should have had therapy about it at some point, but there it goes. But I find that kind of, establishing that kind of friendship very easy. And maybe it's because I can see that person's vulnerability and I can share my vulnerability. And in doing that, I have developed a couple of really close friendships through that, and have, you know, maybe started out with a kind of like meeting their need. It doesn't sound very good, but meeting their need, but then have found that actually there's it's a real treasure for me. That person becomes a real treasure to me. So I think that's interesting, that, you know, that's the way it works for me.
I think that's what I was remembering as well, is that you're both really good at engaging other people to come alongside what you're up to, and you have very different styles in doing that. I remember when, I mean, our eldest is coming up for 30, and when she was 10 days old, Martin, you just rang up and said, could you do this job, Jude? And you basically didn't seem to think it was a problem at all, that I'd just given birth to my first child. And I think that takes, as you said, confidence. But you know, you are great starters of things, from the toddler group, Julia, that you do and still do, and Martin, the homeless work that you do here in Cambridge as well. But you're very good at just kind of getting the best out of other people, but you do it differently. What's that about? Is that something you saw your parents doing, or is it just somehow it's innate to who you are?
I think what I did notice about Martin and I is that I get people involved in what I'm doing because of, I think they need to do that. I think it's like that kind of vulnerable. This would be good for them. They you know, it's kind of opening up an opportunity. So I think I start from that point. And I think Martin starts from seeing their potential and saying, you know, they've got the potential to do this. Wouldn't it be great? And the outcome is mostly the same, but it's just starting from different points, really.
I fundamentally believe in community. I really believe we're not meant to be alone. There are a million projects out there, and I often consider, I'm quite good at making links, so I can quite often see the potential of somebody, and I think by involving them in the thing I want to be involved in, I'm affirming them. I'm saying, I really think you can do this. Yeah. And if that's the case, people will respond well to that. Yeah.
And about family, the way, you know, my family, my dad was certainly an introvert and very quiet, and people absolutely loved him. He was, you know, they came to him for all kinds of help. My mum was much more of an extrovert in a strange kind of way. And she kind of took people under her wing. So I suppose, I don't know, what I realised about my mum, because I did think about that when she was younger and I was younger, she had a friend who was quite a lot older than her. And it was a really special friendship. And then when she was older, she had a friendship with a woman who was quite a lot younger than her, in fact, almost like a daughter. And again, in fact, I think sometimes I thought she was more of a daughter than I was, really. But I mean, I didn't mind that. She was lovely. But just that kind of thing. And sometimes I think the friendships we have, we're almost like surrogate grandparents or parents.
We were talking to a couple of friends this afternoon on a Zoom. They're both 35. And we're really good friends now. We see each other, we go and visit them, they come and visit us. I don't have any sense that I'm older than they are. I just feel that we're good friends.
Yeah.
And
but actually,
you're twice their age.
I'm over twice. I realised
they're younger than our children.
They're 10 years younger than our children.
Yeah, and they're South African, so that their parents are not around. I mean, I don't know how. Actually, to be fair, one of them lived with us for a while, and so so we really got to know her very well. But
Well, I think that's something I've noticed about you as well, is that your home seems to have an open door. I won't say policy because it makes it sound too corporate, but it does. You are one of those people that, because Martin and Julia Evans live 2 streets from where we live, and you're one of the very few people, Martin, who just turns up. You know, that we're all very polite and very diary normally, of people saying, are you free for a coffee in 2 weeks' time? Whereas Martin, you just barrel up,
say hello.
And if it is the wrong moment, it doesn't seem to bother you at all. But I think we've all got terribly shy about thinking, why would somebody want to hear from me? You know, I'm going to be an inconvenience.
Yeah, that would
stops us. Yes.
Yeah,
that's quite deliberate. I mean, I really believe in just barreling up. I think what you just said is true, Judy, and I deliberately do that because I think we ought still to be able to do that.
Yeah,
I believe it too, but I couldn't do it really. But I do believe it.
Yeah.
If I could I'd just like to mention one thing, because I do have a very good friend, and what I think is amazing about her is that she manages to embrace so many people. She's not a respecter of persons. It doesn't matter who you are. She grants you the same respect, the same time, the same care. And I think that is an amazing thing to be able to do, and something that I would aspire to. And yeah.
Okay.
Wow,
well,
that's just a fantastic treasure trove of information and ideas. Thank you, about friendship from 2 perspectives, which is quite different perspectives. That's brilliant. So it's a great jumping off place for us to split into small groups. I'm going to ask Tilly,
to do that.
who's our daughter, who's driving this from Sheffield, to split us up into groups of 4 people or 4 computers, and you'll be divided up by the computer automatically. There's no one's choosing; the computer's choosing randomly. And
hello, just to say, my end is not letting me have the breakout rooms. Have you got
I'll do it.
Okay, we'll do it.
So, thanks, Tilly. So the question is, Judy, while I'm doing this, you tell them what the question is.
Okay, so it's very simple. What is friendship and neighbours for you in Act 3? What's friendship and neighbours about for you in Act 3? We'll type it in the chat, and be friendly to people that you find yourself bounced into rooms with, be kind and listening and all of those things that I'm sure you're really good at. But yeah, so I shall type it in the chat.
So you'll get split up into a group, and then you'll get about a minute's warning to come back together again, and Judy will type this into the
chat. Okay, so what's friendship and neighbours about for you in Act 3?
Hello, it's your daughter.
Hello.
Hi, you're doing a great job.
Are we just broadcasting to you?
Yeah, it's just me. Oh, I can see Jill. Someone called Jill is listening in. Just to say, I think if you put on broadcast message to all rooms, you can put the question there as well. That might be more helpful. I don't know that they can see the chat.
So who's in what rooms?
What time did we go into this?
It's 9. It's 1 minute.
So we're coming out at about.
No, I'm fast here, so we went in at, yeah.
So we're coming out about
5 past.
5 past or 10 past?
No, because we want to hear some
Oh,
feedback.
a bit of
don't we?
feedback.
Yeah. Who's in what group?
Okay. So we got 6. Hi, Tilly.
Hello, sorry, there was just another person who was listening in, and I didn't want you to be talking about people, and if she could hear you, but she's gone now.
We're not talking about anyone.
Breakout room 4 is great.
Who's in there?
Prue, Steph and Jackie.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. So it's interesting. It's put it into 5 computers, 5, 3 and 4 and yeah, it's done a mixture, hasn't it? Yeah. So Tilly,
Hello.
when we close all rooms, that gives them a 1-minute warning?
Yeah.
Yeah. And do we do that?
Yeah, you do that.
Okay. Terrible, can it?
I'll get a better one.
I'll do it.
So have a look in the chat whilst you're waiting, so you can have.
Oh, yeah, I will. Thank you.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah, brilliant.
Is Jenny Cavallo still on?
I think so.
Okay. What was that passage from?
Was that the poem?
Yeah.
Let's we can
Share it. Yeah.
we can share it at the end if everybody wants.
Phone calls make an effort associated. Oh, someone's put it up morning. Make the effort to stay in touch. I'm a talker, never met a stranger.
Never met a stranger.
That's right. Yeah.
That's rather nice.
Underlog can become better at it. Underlog.
Linda says I'm a talker.
Yeah. It can be done, but yesterday, even if only on Facebook. Agreed, listening. I'm an introvert, so it's harder. Actually, can we get through a shared interest? Which church, please? Oh, I mentioned friendships. I'm going to visit people. I was meant to be going to Australia to work, and Martin told me that Australia would always be there, and I should work for Greenbelt, so I paid. That's a lot of fun working with them. That's long. Yes, it was. I went to Australia. Australia was still there. It's on my bucket list. Nicola Williams. My life would be better.
I feel like you two need to have Nicola around for dinner or drinks after this. She seems like so within your
Yeah.
circle.
I'd love to get her as our guest for maybe the world next week, but it's just, we'll talk about that later. Oh, I'm a bit sparkly in the eyes department.
You both look great. I sent a screenshot to Phoebe and Rosie. I think you're looking fab.
Oh, there's a lot of chat.
Yeah, and I think that's my genius idea of the age, because
Yeah, because
I think you're right.
it's put them on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're going to come out of this in about a minute.
Yeah. And also the whole announcement this week about people forming bubbles.
Mm.
So should we do close all rooms? It'll come out in a minute. Yeah?
Yeah. Goats. We're doing goats or not? No, we want to hear from people.
No.
Yeah. Hello. Closing.
I didn't mean to come back. I pressed the wrong button.
Hello.
Martin was just saying
We were
something
just
really
having a really
interesting.
interesting conversation. I pressed the wrong button.
Oh, you could, at least you know how to pick it up again.
We're always pressing the wrong buttons.
Oh dear. Student habits.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
nice to see you.
Yeah.
Nice
Yeah,
to see you.
it's going well. It's a good one.
Oh,
We were in Martin and Julia's group, so that was really nice. And
Ah,
Meg,
that's good. Yes, what a good.
a lady who was muted and didn't say anything.
oh,
Fair
Anyway,
enough.
But
Yeah.
she was very welcome.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think she chose that? Oh, here we go. We're coming back in.
She
Yeah.
might have done.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
And we're back.
I
We're
think
back.
we're all back.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're back in. Lovely. So it's always one of the things that is great fun to kind of clock in and out and see what you're all talking about. But we've decided we won't do that because it's much better if we just butt out and let you lot jump in and I'm sure be very friendly as well. So some amazing comments that have been coming in on the chat, and you've been much more chatty tonight on the chat. I was also wondering what people have made of the government announcement the other day about people being able to attach themselves and make a new bubble, and what that's like, because I think it's really helpful on one level, but I also think it might be very painful for some people who think I can't think of how I could join a household, or you know, to put my hand up and say, excuse me, do you mind if I come and join you?
Can I come into your bubble?
It's
Or can I leave your bubble?
I think it's a bit mixed, really.
Yeah.
But there's some lovely
Linda said, yeah, I'm a talker. I've never met a stranger. I thought that was great.
yes, yeah.
Thanks, Linda.
And a number of you commenting on history you have shared with Martin and Julia as well. Jackie said that she was wondering about going to Australia, and Martin had said, Australia's always going to be there, and you didn't go for a long time. And sure enough, Australia was there. And without going, you ended up doing all sorts of other things. Yeah, good listening is important. Angela's saying that, and a smile says so much. Absolutely.
That poem of Martin's is a favourite. So people have said we can forward that to you afterwards if you like.
Yes,
So,
that's right. That's right. And I think as well, what's really interesting on all this Zooming that everybody's doing in lockdown or through various things, is this phrase that our daughters taught us, which is, it's a bit rude, but it's basically resting bitch face. So, so you might know what that means, but it's when you sort of like that, and without realizing it, you're projecting this sense of disapproval or scowling.
I've got a resting bitch face.
So yeah, tell him if you see it, put it on the chat. Adrian, stop it.
You won't be the first. Yeah. We want to hear from you.
Yeah. So any other comments? Anyone want to come on and be unmuted to just in the last few minutes? Have you got anything you really want to share, or a joke to tell, or something friendly to say maybe? I'm going to work out the average age of people on the Zoom, because you've all put your ages in as well.
Who wants to speak?
Just raise up your hand if you've got a comment or a question, or you want to say anything to Martin and Julia. I think they're still with us. Perhaps they've run away. Oh no, there they are. There they are. There we go.
Everyone's being very.
Oh, they're being shy
very
now.
shy.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think it's interesting to remember what you learnt about friendship from your mum and dad as
Do you
well,
know what?
or the home you grew up in.
I'm not sure that my parents had any friends.
Well, they were not encouraged to have friends.
No, well, my dad was a vicar, and they were kind of trained not to make friends in the parish, so
that wasn't allowed. Basically,
it wasn't allowed, and so
yeah.
I felt, you know, with hindsight, I think they probably missed out on that. You know, they probably could have made good friends that they didn't really. Maybe Mum had one friend when we were in Africa, who she seemed to attach herself to, which I think was probably a good friend, but. I'm not sure about my dad. Yeah. So So, and I suppose you do learn from your parents so many things, or what to do and what not to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, my mum and dad were quite sociable, but and in my dressing gown, my job was to hand round the peanuts when people came. And I think my mum was very, very accepting of all sorts.
She was very accepting of difference,
Yeah,
and she was not judgmental.
No,
whereas
Dad was.
Your dad was very judgmental, I have to say.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think these things do come filtering down, and they affect how we behave, and what is the spirit of friendship in the houses that we're in. But I think we'd love you to remember that, as I'm sure you know only too well, that it's so important in Act 3. The issue of loneliness is really serious and leads to mental health problems and all sorts of difficulties that connect into physical health as well. So we'd really hope that one of the things maybe you're taking out of this tonight is that sense of, it starts with you maybe walking out and saying hello to somebody, or smiling at them, or saying morning,
and trusting, as Martin said, trusting that you're okay, and it's okay to say something, or just to be there, or to be who you are.
Yeah.
Because the other person probably is welcoming your approach. They're unlikely, if you're doing it in a gentle way, they're unlikely to reject it. So, that's something to think about.
Yes, because it's in Act 3, that as we will need one another more, not less, when we do fall over, or when we get locked out, or when we get found in the middle of the night on the heath, as my mum was in the middle of Alzheimer's years. I don't want to be really gloomy as we come to the end of tonight, but the big theme for many of these Zooms is don't wait for the crisis, to do something proactive while you still can, really.
Yeah, get ahead of the curve. So we're wondering what one action you might take away from tonight. Perhaps you could write it in the chat box. It doesn't have to be a grand thing. It could be a tiny thing. In fact, tiny things are great. Everything starts with a tiny step. So write something in the chat box about one thing you might do as a result of tonight's conversations, maybe inspired by what Martin and Judy have said, maybe not, maybe just something else that's occurred to you. That would be great. And we love hearing from you. We appreciate the emails and so on that we've had from you. You can get in touch with us via our website, so that's not difficult. And it's great to hear stories. The stories of Penelope, who wrote to us this week, we mentioned, and what she's doing. And, I think I noticed in her little email to us a kind of note of surprise in how she was able to relocate and to make new friendships when perhaps I hadn't spoken to her, I've never even met her, where I imagine she might have imagined it was going to be harder. So that's an interesting kind of paradox that we have in our heads. Oh, it's going to be very difficult. Sometimes it is difficult, but maybe quite a lot of the time it isn't as difficult as you think. So that's something to think about.
I've just noticed somebody said on the chat as well that it's people who don't judge you, who accept you, warts and all. And I think we feel that you are so lovely towards us, that you accept what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
And we never imagined that when our book came out in April that we'd end up having this kind of weekly Zoom. And next week we will be talking about The World, which is another branch. Quick book plug. And it's become so much more topical.
Isn't it weird? We've said this before, but when we first started doing Guardian masterclasses, and we got everybody, like 60 people in the room, to divide up around different issues, the different branches of the tree, the one that had world on it had one person in it, whereas all the other people gathered around the other topics.
Money, health,
whereas the
friends,
world, to do with all kinds of obvious reasons right now, seems to become much more of a concern for people, and that's great. So we're going to talk about that next week. If you've got something that you want to say to us about the world, email us in advance, and we'll try and get it into the conversation, because that would be even fantastic to do. So thank you.
Because we know that there's a lot of world issues that worry us and trouble us as we get older. Before COVID, a lot more people were thinking about climate change and what was the state of the planet we're leaving for those of us who've got children and grandchildren and other generations to come. But not just if you've got children, we're all carrying that. So what are the world issues that trouble you and keep you awake at night? We will.
I'm loving personally the Black Lives Matter conversation, the whole agenda being raised. in a way that I don't remember it being this high on the agenda since the Martin Luther King era when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And that's really great. I think that means that we can move forward on this, I hope, in a significant way.
Yeah. All right. So we want to say a big thank you to Martin and Julia Evans.
Yes, thank you very much.
Everybody wave at Martin and Julia.
Thanks.
It's been lovely to hear your journey of friendship and being a neighbour and how different you both are. And we want to thank you for your enthusiasm and good, rich content there. And all the chat that's come in for being honest and vulnerable about how old you are. Perhaps you made this up, we don't know. But
I'm sure you didn't.
But we're going to go off and have a glass of wine now and raise a glass to all of you and thank you for being friends.
Our virtual friends.
Too. Cheerio.
So what was the average age?
I will let you know. Haven't worked it out.
Maths O level failed.
Exactly.
No, B grade.
I got a B.
Yes, hooray. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Well done. Thank